Welcome to Blue Marble Defender story number 17, The Boa and the Birdman. Leo made these remarks to friends a month after the events took place. Chapter 1, All is Not Right. Like you guys, I was just getting used to being released from the coronavirus lockdown. The day started out well enough, and after breakfast, I decided to put on my virtuous hat. Not a real hat, it's a metaphor, okay? And I cleaned up the kitchen. As I was heading for my workshop, Rook grabbed me and asked if I'd play catch with him. Well, I guessed the virtuous hat was still in place, so I agreed, grabbed my cap and glove, and we threw the ball around. You know, grounders, pop-ups, make the play at second base, and all that. When the sun got hot, we headed back home. I tanked up on water, opened the workshop door, and that's when things went downhill. Filing cabinet drawers open, papers on the floor, laptop gone. My English teacher would say, "You must have been vexed." Yeah, right. Maybe I would have used stronger language. Pops had just returned in the car from somewhere, and I called to him. He came running, surveyed the scene, and said, "The burglar might still be in the house. Corral Mom and Rookie and take them to the kitchen." He took Rook's baseball bat from the hallway and started checking closets and rooms, but the burglar had gone. As you might imagine, we talked about nothing but the burglary for the rest of the day. We suspected both Mom's and Pop's laboratories had been entered, but the mess in my workshop meant it had been the target. After taking an inventory of my blueprints and work papers, I realized the details of 6 inventions had been swiped, but I couldn't see the pattern to indicate the thief's interest. Fortunately, Pops had filed patents for me on all my stuff, even though I didn't plan to sell the rights or manufacture them. He had also backed them up on the cloud and reprinted it all for me while I cleaned up the mess. So there was no real problem, and I had my workshop back in order by the end of the day. Being burglarized is creepy, and we all felt violated, but a few good things did come from that burglary. We secured ourselves better at home by locking the doors and locking our filing cabinets. We also became more vigilant of people on the street, improved our cybersecurity, and initiated automatic backups. But the best thing came from Rookie. Somewhere along the line he said, "Gee, if somebody is willing to break the law just to get at your inventions, bro, I'll make some too." Well, yeah, I know, dear reader, those words sound a little empty-headed, but even though Rook jokes around and sometimes says some goofy things, he's serious and he's smart. So who knows what good may yet come from the break-in. Chapter 2, A Trip to Paris. Now, a few weeks after the burglary, Interpol invited Pops to join them in a group of French Sûreté detectives in dealing with a gaggle of captured extraterrestrials that appeared in Paris during the lockdown, and they had to find some that had escaped. The police had been keeping it from the public to avoid adding an ET scare on top of the coronavirus. Mom couldn't go because she was teaching a yoga class, and she proposed that Rook and I go with Pops. We could see some sights and have some fun while he worked. Pops was concerned he'd be nonstop busy and suggested that we stay with his friends Tony and Skip. I checked with Tony, and she said they'd be delighted to have us hang with them. Before we left, I read a news article about images appearing in the night sky over Paris. They were advertisements aimed at kids, and they were for electronic cigarettes and drug paraphernalia. The mayor was very unhappy about it, but the police couldn't find out who was behind it or where the images were coming from. And anyhow, there was really no ordinance against projecting images into the sky. In about a nanosecond, I connected the theft of my hologram projector blueprints to the cigarette-selling villain Fred Fund that Rookie and I had once crossed swords with near Geneva, and a second time near Chamonix. The next afternoon we took the TGV from Bordeaux and arrived at Paris's Montparnasse station. Only took about 2 hours. That sure beat the 6 hours it would have taken in the car. We took a taxi with Pops to Tony and Skip's place in the 15th arrondissement. Tony greeted Rook and me with hugs and said, "Oh, welcome, my sweet little darlings. So nice to have you here." Rook and I looked over to Pops, and he sent back a grin that said, "Get over it. You may have risked your lives saving the world a dozen times, but you're still kids. And if you weren't here, the honor of being greeted as Tony's little darling would have fallen to me." Pops shared a glass of wine with him. Rook and I took fruit juice, and then Pops headed to Sûreté headquarters on Quai des Orfèvres. Tony made us a great steak frites, and over dinner I told her, Rookie, and Skip about my suspicion of who was behind the mysterious advertising images. When dinner was finished, Skip said, "Hey, it's almost 7:30, the time those images normally first appear. Let's go to the balcony and take a look." As my watch clicked over to 7:30, the evening sky filled with colorful 3D images. The first was a ditzy-looking cartoon character smoking up a storm through some kind of an electronic pipe. He shared it with 2 other kid characters, and they danced around looking gaga, and the scene ended with the words, "It's way cool. Get yours at fp.com." The image morphed into a kid walking down a sidewalk eating an ice cream cone. She quickly slurped it down, pulled out a small tube, and puffed out a cloud of pink smoke surrounding the words, "There's nothing better than a cherry berry smoke. Go to fp.com. I thought, FP. That cements it. I was now 100% sure who was behind this, and I was angry. I was also annoyed that nobody could find the hologram's projector, and when I said it out loud to Skip, he said, "Yeah, if our Parisian air were dirtier, the light's origin point would be easy to find, but the virus has kept cars home. Who would have expected such a downside to clean air? Hey, but I got an idea." He walked into the back room, returned with a short tube a few centimeters wide, pulled on both ends, and it became a spyglass about 30 centimeters long. "My gift to you. Please take it," he said. "You'll help me empty a closet, and with luck it'll help you protect young kids. Take a look at the holograms now and check for distortions along the edges. I'm hoping variations in those distortions, when seen from different locations, will give you clues to where they originated. When you're done here on the porch, we'll hop into my car and take a drive." Well, the image appeared to hover over the Seine River toward the Palais de Chaillot in the 16th arrondissement, but neither Rookie nor I could detect any distortions. Skip navigated the traffic to the Arc de Triomphe, but from there the image seemed to hover in the same place, and we again could see no distortions. As Skip drove down the Champs-Élysées toward the Louvre, we caught a break. Flashes of light came from the Seine between the Eiffel Tower and the Palais de Chaillot. Tourists had set off fireworks, and as their smoke rose, it revealed light beams coming from high on the Eiffel Tower. Now we had a smoking gun. We gave high fives all around and returned to the apartment, pleased with our evening's work. Tony let us use her laptop to research the tower's layout, and we concluded the holograms originated from the top floor, which was not completely open to the public. Rookie and I made a plan of attack for the next evening and hit the sack. We were beat. The next morning, Tony took us to her favorite tea shop for breakfast. She gave us a tour around the 15th and asked what we'd like to do and see in the afternoon. Rookie lobbied hard for the tour of the Paris sewers. He said we'd learn the city's history from an unusual perspective and even get to see where Jean Valjean escaped in the story Les Miserables. He pretty much sold us on the idea, but When he continued about how exciting it would be to see swarms and swarms of river rats, Tony thankfully vetoed it, and we wound up on the Seine River cruise. That proved to be a super way to take in the city. View Notre Dame Cathedral, lots of museums, parks, and bridges. Now, after an early dinner that evening, Tony bade us happy hunting. Skip hailed a taxi, and we arrived near the Eiffel Tower at 7 o'clock. Chapter 3. Above the Crowd. Skip told us he'd sit at the Esplanade Cafe and enjoy a glass of wine rather than ride up the tower and challenge his vertigo at 300 meters. And he added that since we'd successfully dealt with Funt twice before, he'd leave us to it. Still feeling like big shots after that remark, Rookie and I got a second ego boost when we showed our Blue Marble Defender ID cards to a guard, and he escorted us around the elevator queue and into the security office. After we explained our mission, his chief gave us each an electronic key card that would open all locked doors. Being still only 7:10, Rook said he wanted to use the extra time to check out the glass floor on the first level before searching for Fund. But I was in a different place. I had Fund on the brain and told Rook I'd take a look around and wait for him on the top floor. The main elevator continues up to a second level. We are changed to a smaller elevator for the third level. I've been up there a few years ago when I was about Rookie's age, but that time it was the middle of the afternoon. Now it was night, and the vista was spectacular. I was jazzed by Paris at night. The street lights, the car headlights, and the bits of street noise that reached the top. They all play you like a 12-string guitar. But you become the full orchestra with the faint smell of oil from the elevator machinery, the lingering smell of heat from the afternoon sun burning the tower's metal, the plane going into Orly while another one's taking off from Charles de Gaulle. Whew, 300 meters above the city. What a place. What a time. But I was here on business. So I put those tourist vibes aside and set out to find the creep who was tempting kids to start smoking and doing drugs. I thought of waiting for Rook to come up, but hey, waiting's not my specialty. I walked the public corridor and took a quick look into the reconstructed office of Gustave Eiffel. Its wax statues of Eiffel and Thomas Edison seemed to invite me into their conversation, but I declined and scoured the corridor for the secured door that led to the apartment hidden behind the office. A recessed, covered keycard reader revealed the hidden door. I didn't knock. Knocking's not my specialty either. I inserted the keycard and tentatively pressed the latch. No resistance. So I pushed it all the way, and it opened, well-oiled, silent. A bubble of pressurized air hit my face, and a small wind whistled through my ears for a moment. I looked in and saw the shadow of a man against the tower's external lights. I'd hit pay dirt. I stepped over the threshold and closed the door behind me. The man's hands held the end of a giant version of my hologram projector. It wasn't turned on, and he was panning from Montmartre toward the left bank, seemingly searching for a focal point. He stopped when it was pointed straight across the Seine toward the Palais, and he put his finger on the illumination switch. I'd made it halfway across the 6 meters separating us when his eyes, still focused outward, he flipped the switch, turned, and said flatly, "So how'd you find me?" "Fund, you give yourself too much credit." He stared at me, smirked, and said, "That assessment seems misplaced coming from a fool who can't secure his belongings. And tell me, where's that walking baseball mitt you hang out with?" I said, "Oh, you mean the guy who turned you over to the police in Les Houches? That guy? The one who held you with your own gun? Well, he's probably chatting up some friends of his at the Sûreté and convincing them to skip dessert and come haul you away. And while the questions are flying, how did you find my workshop? Oh, that was a total accident. After those Chamonix cops let me go. You do know they let me go, right? There was no real crime with my balloon, and they had no proof I was behind the rockfall in Les Houches that made that dam. Well, I just wanted to get out of France, and I didn't want to go back to Switzerland in case they'd thought up some new charges against me. So I hopped over to England. And what do you think I see on the front page of the Times of London? Ha! 2 goofy grins under a headline saying, "You saved Stonehenge from some gang." The article said you lived in Bordeaux, and I started to think about how useful some of your gadgets might be to me, and the rest was easy. You, Mr. Bright Boy would-be detective, you seem to know nothing about securing your stuff. Well, I called him a lowlife and said I assumed he'd been after my plans for the hologram projector. He confirmed it and said he'd also found lots of other goodies, he said. I tell you, that got me worrying. I guess I should have asked what he liked best, but I didn't. I just said, "Let's get this over with. You're going down. This time it's for corrupting French youth, violating dark sky regulations, trespassing, misuse of public property, and whatever else the locals can think of. You might avoid jail again, but it'll make my day to see you thrown out of yet another town." I pulled out my phone to call Pops, and just then Rookie unlatched the door. Chapter 4. A Surprise or Two. "Oh no, not you again, Fund," Rook said. "I should have known it was you. Who else would shine poison into the air?" Fund gave out an evil cackle, waved him forward, and said, "Where's your stupid little dog, Boy Scout?" Rook just shook his head. Then Fund put his thumbs together like a movie director and said, "So the suckin' hero, the superhero, he walks in right on cue and he sidles up to the first superhero." Fund dropped his movie director imitation and then said, "Oh, hey, you two. Do you have plans for breakfast tomorrow? Want a donut?" Both of us shrugged at the non sequitur, and Fund continued, "I'll see what I can do for you, but oops, what's that?" He put his hand behind his ear as though listening to something, reached behind, and pulled a lever. A thick steel hoop dropped around us, pulling a net behind it as it crashed to the floor. We weren't touched, but coated steel wire was now less than an arm's length in every direction. The net's holes were about the size of your hand. You could put your arm through, but never your head or body. I reached down to pick up the hoop, grabbed it, but oh! It was electrified. I thought my head would explode. Fund called out, "Oh, tut, sorry, bozo. I should have told you the donut's full name. It's the hot donut of death. This donut's not for you to eat. It's kind of the reverse. Donuts supposedly attract cops, but this one keeps them away, or should I say puts them away." He did a little jig. He put his hands on his hips, smiled at us, and then let out that same snidely cackle. But where were we? "Oh, yes, bozo, why don't you carry on? Remember, you were phoning the cops." This guy had gone off the deep end, I thought, and he needs to be locked up. I raised my phone, pushed the green button. Nothing came out but a busy signal. The net blocked the call. "Oh, too bad, bozo," Fund said. "And too bad you didn't bring your little pooch. He might have saved the day for you, as he did in the valet. But he might also have made a nice appetizer for my friend." Rookie and I looked at each other, wondering what he could be talking about. When we looked back, Fund was gone. We looked around the room, and finally, Rookie turned toward the shadows behind us and said, "Oh, there he is." Fun was standing in the corner, totally still, like a wax statue. And then his voice came to us from the other direction. A little confusing, isn't it, boys? His voice was there, but he wasn't. We turned again, and he was still standing behind us. Rookie shouted, "Nice ventriloquism act!" "Mais non, mon petit chou," Fun's voice intoned. "Your senses deceive you. You two have to understand. We've met 3 times now, and I've decided that's more than enough meetings. I regret to inform you. Whoops, scratch that. I do inform you that this is our last meeting. I have lots of things to accomplish, and I'm tired of you two getting in my way." A gurgling sound made us turn back. Fun was melting onto the floor. The sight mesmerized us as he disintegrated into a puddle, and then inflated and became a coiled garden hose. Then in lurching bursts, the hose began to expand and unravel. It became a snake. It grew to a huge size. It formed a head with huge square jaws that opened and closed silently, and then with a metallic clang. We turned when Fun's voice oozed at us from near the windows. "I read that you two know about extraterrestrials, and yeah, you're so well-intentioned and pretty. You only want to protect against them and study them and take care of them and all that yada-yada sweet talk that you scientists use. If you had any real brains, you'd take advantage of the situation and use them to make some money for yourselves." It was tough listening to that jerk's disembodied voice lecturing us, especially while some fearsome creature was growing just centimeters away. Fun's oily cackle dripped out this time, and we had to strain to hear as he spoke softly. "You guys must have heard about a bunch of ETs called shapeshifters arriving in France when a rocket ship returned last week. But maybe not. The police didn't want to scare people, so they just tried to lock up all the ETs, and they wrung their hands, and they sat around like fools. I used my connections to get hold of that bad boy behind you and made it my pet. Getting it to do my bidding was simple. I just found out its favorite food, fed it, and then starved it until it did what I wanted before I fed it again. Now, it's my reliable servant." I said, So what did you feed it?" Fun said, "I saw it like to wrap itself around things and crush them like a boa constrictor. So I fed it red meat, recently butchered red meat. It likes to squeeze the meat and then swallow it whole." I almost puked, but quickly said, "You certainly have not treated the creature with dignity, but at least you kept it alive." "Oh!" A booming laugh filled the room, and Fun's voice bellowed, "Yes, I have made it my business to feed it well and keep it alive. But in only a minute, I'll be passing that job over to you." We heard a clunking sound behind us, turned, and saw the snake creature had grown to the size of a python. We watched it slowly unwind and rear up like a cobra far above our heads. Then it bent itself down and poked its head through the net. I was terrified. Rook and I moved as far back as we could, but it slowly swayed and moved toward us, staying about a meter off the floor. Its jaws were all I could look at. They were weird, like they'd been bolted on and then covered by snakeskin. It had dead eyes and a skinny red forked tongue that darted in and out. But it was those jaws mesmerized and scared me. They were so huge the creature could easily have swallowed my foot and cut off my leg anywhere it wanted. Fun's voice said, "It's almost mealtime, and I want to tell you one last thing before you go. I know you don't give a damn about my feelings. They're nothing to you. You're all wrapped up in chasing things you think are important. Your dreams of a perfect world, but you hurt me real bad. You tricked me out of wrecking the WHO, and you did it again. You shamed me twice. There is not going to be a third time. And I know you won't be thinking about my feelings when you're being digested, so I'll just tell you what they'll be." Oh, a cackle oozed out again, and then in a sing-song voice he said, "My feelings will start with relief, move on to a sense of cheerful well-being, rise to euphoria, and subside to enduring satisfaction. Oh, I'm savoring the anticipation right now." Fun was right. Listening to him bare his feelings was not our priority at that moment. We pushed back away from the snake until the net wouldn't yield any farther. 1.5 meters of the snake was now inside the net. It was less than 1 meter away, coming at us slowly, horizontally, its dead eyes on our guts and its forked tongue darting and retreating. I couldn't just wait for it to strike, so I put all I had into a kick and caught it right under the jawbone. It rose with my kick, its eyes blazed, but it seemed otherwise unfazed by my kick. Then it darted quickly toward me, jaws wide open. But my brilliant brother, my fantastic brother, his eyes turned to steel. He pulled some gadget I'd never seen out of his pocket, jutted his right arm next to the thing's head, and pushed a button. A spot on the thing's open jaw glowed red, and it dropped to the floor with a heavy clunk. One more second, and the thing would have ripped my guts open. I swallowed my hand, or wrapped itself around me. Man, my body felt like quivering jelly. I'd never appreciated what it meant to have a brother until that second. I could have melted. Rook and I knew from our work in London that the fall would immobilize the shapeshifter for a few minutes, and with luck, whatever Rook did to it would give us more time. He immediately started cutting the net for us to escape, but made it through only 3 of the wires before his gadget died. But he could pull the steel wires back, and I could squirm out. I pulled him back, did the same for him. We had our lives back. Chapter 5. A couple of twists. But Mr. Fred Fun was still out there somewhere, invisible. He didn't want us to live to see another morning, and he probably had more trouble in store for us. I needed to find him, and I tried to taunt. "So much for your slimy monster, Fun. What's our next game?" His voice came from near where the hologram projector, still shining its poison out the open window. "You get plan B now, bozo. You're in for a plane ride without a plane." I raced at the voice, pulled out a bag of electrostatic microplatelets I'd concocted after I discovered my invisible cloak's blueprints had been stolen. I held my breath to avoid inhaling them and waved the open bag up, down, and all around. They did their job. He'd made a copy of the cloak all right, but now his outline was fully visible. Fun reacted like a cat. He tossed off his cloak, showing himself in a red, white, and gold wingsuit. It was made of some light fabric that connected his arms to his legs and provides lift and maneuverability in the air. Some Yosemite rock climbers use these bird suits to soar off enormous cliffs after their ascent. He grabbed a 30 centimeter-long wrench I hadn't noticed leaning on the pedestal's projector darted at me and whacked my ankle. Pain exploded through me, and I collapsed like a pop balloon. He manhandled my pulsing ankle, dragged me to the open glass door by the hologram projector, and threw my legs out. Then he kicked my head, pushed my shoulder with his heel, and sent me into the void. I fell all the way to the esplanade and splatted. Ha! So, whoops, excuse, hold everything, sorry. Very bad joke. Really, I was just kidding. Now I'm going back to reality. Bear with me again. The view of all that air below parted my fog of pain just in time. Only a meter down, before my fall accelerated, a lightning rod protruded from the tower. Some primitive part of my brain told my arms to grab it. I remember the simple-minded thought that struck me. This skinny strand of spaghetti won't support me for long. It'll bend, my hands will slip, and I'll go down. I knew I had to find a way to use my legs for added support, but how? Rook told me that while I was dangling, he went after Fund in a rage. Fund could have been holding all the weapons in the Tower of London, and Rook would still have beat him to a pulp. But Fund ran to a second window door at the far end of the room, took a running jump out, and soared toward parts unknown. Rook wanted to throw something at him and make him crash, but he knew my situation was precarious, and he zipped back to help. I looked up, saw Rook's hand, but I couldn't reach it. He saw the lightning rod bending and knew I couldn't hold out long. He saw me trying to lever a leg up and tried to grab it, but we couldn't make contact. I tried with everything I had, but all I succeeded in doing was letting my phone and spyglass slip out of my pockets. I gasped that he should take a look for a rope, and he said there was none. Then he disappeared and returned dragging the snake. He wrapped his tail around the pedestals of the projector, secured it somehow with that wrench, and pushed his head down toward me. I know, it sounds stupid, like the head. Like, what if the snake wakes up and bites my head off? But if you'd been there, you know he did the only sensible thing. I could never have held onto the snake's tail. You'll love what I did when the snake's head reached me. I put my nose right next to the snake's. I jammed my hand into his jaw and grasped a back tooth. This supported me a lot better than the lightning rod, but the snake's teeth were slippery. Now I had to adjust. The best I could do was jam my wrist right between two teeth and make a fist. Not exactly comfy, but it worked. For a time at least. The muscle fatigue and pressure on my fist were the big things, but it's the smaller things that I remember the most clearly, like the foul breath from the snake's mouth and the slippery goo from his tongue hitting my forehead. But I had a lot of motivation to hang on, but I also knew my strength would give out eventually. Chapter 6, Down Below. Skip told me he just decided to order a flute of Mum's Cordon Rouge when something crashed on the esplanade behind his chair and blasted glass shards through the cafe. He just figured out it was the telescope when my mobile phone smashed down right next to it. He knew Rook didn't carry a phone and immediately used his to alert Pops. Fortunately, Pops was out on a reconnaissance mission in the Sûreté's helicopter when Skip's call arrived, and the pilot made a beeline for the tower. The whoomp from his chopper's blades filled my ears just as I was starting imagining what it'd be like to give up. I was ecstatic when it came into view, as you might imagine, but according to Pops, it was a huge disappointment for him. There I was, near the top of the Eiffel Tower, suspended from the mouth of a giant snake, and he didn't have his camera. He swears that's a true story, but his sense of humor is a bit like Rookie's. Anyhow, he had a rope. He let it down. Rook got it, secured the snake with some fancy Boy Scout knot, secured himself, and slid down the snake where he secured me and wrapped his legs around me. Then he reached up. He released the wrench holding the snake to the pedestal and gave a huge push against the tower, sending us and the snake into free fall. Whoa, my stomach dropped and I almost barfed. I'd never done bungee jumping, but it must give a similar sensation. Fortunately, Pops pulled the chopper away from the tower at the same time, and we gradually made a swooping arc down over the Champ de Mars. We circled almost to Skip's apartment and gradually descended toward Napoleon's tomb at the far end of the Champ de Mars. Yes, I had taken my arm out of the snake's mouth when Rookie tied me with a rope. And yes, the snake happily stayed knocked out. We saw about 40 police vehicles waiting, lights flashing, and the chopper lowered us down into a huge net the emergency services must have set up. Pops untied Rook's knots, and men in white coats bundled the snake away into a van in what seemed like seconds. Pops helped Rookie and Mia off the bouncing net, and we boarded a helicopter, grateful that the Sûreté had offered us a quick lift back to join Skip at the Esplanade Cafe. Our scramble out from under the helicopter's blades must have been an interesting diversion for the people waiting for the tower's elevators. Rookie was shaking his fist at the sky. I was limping because of my sore ankle. Pops was walking with his arms held wide out towards Skip, was running into the chopper's blast to greet us. We made it to the table, and Pops gave a hoot when he saw that Skip had ordered a whole bottle of champagne in anticipation of our success. For the first few minutes at the table, I shook, at least inside. My most vivid memory, though, is the smell of a croque monsieur being delivered to the next table. When our waiter arrived, I asked for hot salted water and antiseptic. I gargled off the snake oil and wiped myself down, knowing that if Mom had been there, she would have given me the full microbe testing and cleaning treatment. Anyway, Rookie acted a bit weird as we sat at the table. He laughed at the least little thing he saw around us or heard in the conversation. He might have been a cartoon character walking through a comic book. But I know I was shaken as well by our close call and knew exactly where the laughs were coming from. It took time, but Skip's presence reassured us there was in fact a real world, and his questions helped us settle down and re-enter it. Rookie and I alternated in telling our story, and Pops was pretty surprised when I told how Fund had tamed the shapeshifter. He insisted, as usual, that we defenders always must be ethical and never take advantage of innocents or those weaker than us. He said he would have liked to interrogate Fund, but he was off in the wind. The police would flag his record, and if he ever received as little as a parking ticket, they'd pick him up. The Sûreté had already alerted the Swiss police, but Interpol had said they had too many nastier offenders that they were chasing to give him priority. Skip proposed a toast to Rookie and me, saying we'd rid Paris of a menace and deserved to have our smiling faces projected over the Seine before Fund's projector was dismantled. Pops added that two of the world's most precious commodities were initiative and courage, and he toasted that we continue to use them to aid others, hopefully without having to dangle 300 meters above the ground. The table chit-chat moved on to interesting topics beyond tonight's drama. Pops and Skip discussed research and experiments showing how novel molecules could be synthesized from silicon, other minerals, and carbon, and they speculated on what conditions on the planets or moons of their origin might have led to the evolution of shapeshifters. I tried to participate, but the image of those snake jaws and what they could have done blocked out everything for me. Before long, I hit a wall. Rookie said I fell asleep in my chair and he had to hold my shoulders to keep me from falling over. I awoke only when Pops and Skip were pouring me into one of Interpol's small Gulfstream jets at Orly Airport, but I have no idea how we got there. Rook buckled me in, and I slept a good sleep until we landed in Bordeaux. Now that things are back kind of about to normal and life has become a little boring, my mind started speculating on where Fund might have gone, and on his passionate words about us ignoring his feelings, that they've haunted me too. Besides causing him to be arrested in our first two encounters with him, did we do things or say things in ways that would justify making him hate us? Hate us enough to kill us or want to kill us? Well, this is food for thought sometime in the future. Maybe we do have to work on listening better, even to criminals. Nothing simple. That's the end, folks.